Want to maximise the harvest between now and your summer plantings? Plant these seeds now for spring abundance. Hi, I'm Linda and I grow my own food here in Southeast Australia, and today we're going to be looking at 5 crops that you can start right now for spring harvest and still allow time to get in your summer plantings. First up is everyone's favourite, and that is potatoes. Now I've been out and bought some seed potatoes. This one is a King Edward, and I've also got some Desiree potatoes, and these varieties cover all the uses that I like to do with the potatoes. And I've bought the seed potatoes on this occasion because I want to avoid what's been happening with my potatoes, and that is scab. Now scab is just sort of a growth on the skin of the potatoes that makes it a bit scaly and horrible to look at. And the potato, once you peel it, is perfectly fine to eat, but I think it probably does affect the performance of your potato plant. So I really want to avoid that. So to do that, I've bought my new seed potatoes, and I'm going to be planting in a different garden bed. The garden bed is this one here, which on my summer plan, I've made a note to plant out capsicums in it, and I've also decided that some onions down one end would be okay too, but it's okay to change your mind. So what I might do is just make this whole bed a potato bed. Potatoes take sort of 10 to 12 weeks from planting to harvest, so I usually don't plant out things like capsicum till mid-November. So there's plenty of time between now, mid-August, and mid-November to get a crop of potatoes grown and harvested. Now, except for just a bit of light weeding before I plant my potatoes, this bed is ready to go. I don't know if you recognise this space, but this here is where I built one of my compost paths, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description. But basically I dug out the soil from here and put the top soil, the really good dark soil, onto this garden bed here. Now the rest of the soil I've shipped out, and then I've filled this whole area with lots of organic material so that it acts like a sponge and soaks up moisture, which will be fantastic right next to this bed where I'm going to grow the potatoes. Now I've also just added a layer of organic material which has kind of broken down, and this garden bed won't really take much effort to get ready to put our potatoes in. So all that's needed in these spaces is just a light run over. I use the back of my sickle so it doesn't affect the blade, and that's quick and easy, just for disturbing those little weeds, and we should get the potatoes growing up ahead of those being any sort of issue. With the garden bed mostly weed free now, I'm going to get my potatoes in. And I'll spread them all out to start with a variety at one end and a different variety at the other. So the far end is King Edward, and the closer end is these Desiree. And now I've just got to dig these in, and I'm putting them about 10 to 15 centimetres deep into the soil and covering them over. Now during the season, as these grow, I will be mulching them and adding compost sort of halfway through the growing season. Now both the compost and the mulch will help hold the moisture, because having an even moisture for your potatoes is really quite important. The potatoes do best in full sun, so that's sort of 6 to 8 hours of sunshine during their life. As the potatoes grow, I will be sort of hilling them up a bit, and I mostly use organic material for this, whether it be compost or straw or grass clippings, anything like that. And that is to help reduce the chance of any of the tubers being exposed to sunshine as they grow. It also encourages kind of more tuber development. Alrighty. So with the tubers planted, all this bed needs now is a good water and just a bit of mulch on top. And just remember, we're all subject to different microclimates. If you're still going to be subject to frost, be prepared to cover over your potatoes because they are sensitive to that. Also, if you find that your potatoes aren't really ready to harvest for a full potato before you want to plant your summer crops, something like capsicum, then you can always harvest it for a new potato, which grows in about 7 to 8 weeks. Next up for our fast growing crops, we're going to be planting some radishes. Right here is where by mid-November I want to be planting some tomatoes. So these plants need to grow pretty quickly. Now already in this garden I've got some cabbages that I planted at the start of winter. Some are being a bit decimated by pests. This one's a little wombok. But I think at the moment I could squeeze in some daikon kind of around the edges here and maybe the breakfast radishes in the middle. Now I'm just going to create a bit of a drill through the middle here. And the breakfast radish is a fairly small plant, so I can plant it directly under my trellis here and it won't be a problem. And this is the quicker growing one. So these should be about 5 centimetres apart, but if you kind of just sprinkle them in, you can always thin them out later. And I'll just sort of gently cover them over. Now the daikon radish is a much larger plant, so I won't put it in drills, but I will just put it in spots sort of every 10 centimetre. I'll drop a couple of seeds just to make sure that they do germinate. Now this soil has already got some compost on it. I can add some more compost in a few weeks' time as the, or a couple of weeks' time as the little plants start to appear. And I'll thin those out just to make sure there's only one plant so that it gets to a really good size really quickly. With a little bit of water, this garden will quickly come to life with all those radishes, and it shouldn't really impact on my brassicas. And all of this, in 3 months' time, when I want to plant my tomato plants, should all be well and truly harvested, and I'll be able to put in my little tomatoes to grow up for summer. The next quick growing crop is peas. Now you can get different varieties, you know, snow peas, snap peas, shelling peas. And they do mature at different rates. Your snow peas and snap peas you might be able to harvest a lot earlier than the shelling peas, which you do have to wait for those pods to fill out. So you need to consider that in your planting thoughts. So what I'm going to do is to plant some snap peas today in the area where I'm going to be planting beans in summer. And I'll be planting some peas, but I'm going to put that in a bed that I'm not going to put early summer plantings into, but I'll probably put successional plantings like extra zucchini and squash later in the season when the peas are well and truly finished. Now, I have shown in a recent video my little pea plants that I did an experiment with planting out of season, and I planted early winter. But they did get a bit battered by frosts and the winds of winter. But you can see with recent warm conditions, some of these little plants are coming to life. So I'm still hopeful to get a crop of this planting that was a bit of an experiment. But this planted in a different bed should be planted at the perfect time, because you can plant them in autumn, and in cool areas you can plant them in spring as well. So I'll definitely get a crop of this, and I'm pretty hopeful that this will come good for me too. This is the bed where I'll be planting my peas, the shelling peas. But as you can see, it will need a little bit of work before I get them in, so I won't be doing that today. But I will be planting some of my sugar snap climbing peas. Now I'll be planting them right here, where early summer I'll be planting bean seeds. But these should be harvestable by the end of spring if we plant right now. This bed is next to paths that I've created compost paths with. So it's got a lot of the topsoil that's been put over the bed. Not much preparation. I'm just going to kind of smooth it out a bit just to even it all up. And then we can add in our little pea seeds. Oh, potatoes. I usually pull up some potatoes whenever I'm doing some gardening. Now these seeds are a non-hybrid, open pollinated, organic type seed, which I like to get because they come without any of the fungicides on them that your more commercial seed companies put on them. And that I like that because it doesn't affect the soil. There's a lot of fungal organisms in soil, and the fungicides will just kill them off. And you need all the organisms to help feed all your plants. Now I'm just putting 2 in each hole, and I can always thin them later, but this is just to allow for failure of germination. And you can always dig up the little plants and spread them to little holes if both have failed down the track. Well, that's 3 of our 5 crops in the ground, direct sown. The other 2 crops that I want to squeeze in around the garden are ones that I prefer to start in trays. Lettuce is a crop that I like to start either in my little snails or in trays because I can kind of keep an eye on it. Sometimes those seeds don't always germinate, so you need to know whether your seeds are good or bad. Now the garden knows exactly what seeds are good because it just grows them. But if I want to introduce some other varieties, that's when I like to start them in trays. So that's what I've done. I've started them about a week ago, and they're coming along quite nicely. But they're the sort of crop that I can sort of squeeze into a garden bed like this. Back in, I think it was February, I planted these Savoy cabbages, and as you can see, this beauty here is just about ready to harvest, and that's going to free up some space here in which I can plant those lettuce. And I could probably even harvest a second one and just have this whole bed as lettuce. And then by the time they're ready, I've just got the leafy variety. They're ready in sort of 6 to 8 weeks, or even quicker because you can just pull the outer leaves off. And they'll be finished by the time I want to plant perhaps some bush beans like borlotti beans, sort of in this space here would be perfect. And spinach is the 5th crop. Now here I did do a bit of a trial of planting spinach out of season. I transplanted in winter, and these plants really haven't thrived, although they might start to kick in now. But if you start some seeds now, again, that's something I've started in tray just so I can keep a better eye on them. Start them now, get them in the ground, and you should have a crop within 50 days that you can harvest, put in the freezer like I do, and I just grab that out, throw it into casseroles like a Moroccan lamb stew or something like that, and it's beautiful. So you should be able to get a crop of that before planting your summer veg. So you could replace your spinach with something like your bush beans, like the borlotti beans, which I like to plant a lot of, because you can use that as dried beans right throughout the year. Well, that's my 5 fast-growing crops that will be harvested before needing to plant out for summer. I would love to know in the comments what plants you're growing out that you hope to harvest to allow for summer plantings. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give me a like and consider subscribing if you haven't. And you'll be able to follow along to see how I go with transitioning to summer. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.